My name's Erica Bond, and I am the Vice President of Justice Initiatives at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I'd like to thank you for joining us for this third and final installment of the webinar series, Demystifying AI in Criminal Justice. This event is co-hosted by John Jay College's Future Public Safety Initiative, which I lead, and the AI and Justice Consortium. We invite you to learn more about both initiatives using the links provided in the chat. The first two webinars in this series, Demystifying AI in Criminal Justice, focused on how AI is impacting policing and court processes. This last program is going to delve into the role of AI in our systems of incarceration and reentry. We have a fantastic group of experts here who are going to share their expertise about the risks and the opportunities posed by AI when applied in correctional settings and in reentry. I want to just be clear that in hosting this program, we are not endorsing the widespread use of AI in the criminal justice system. Our goal here really is to educate about what is happening in the field, raise important questions about the risks posed when deploying AI in highly imperfect systems, and identify where there are opportunities for those tools to improve the lives of people who come into contact with the criminal system. As I said before the last panel, our hope is that any implementation of AI in the criminal process enhances the legitimacy of those processes and expands rather than restricts equitable access to justice for all. So I'd like to thank today's panelists for joining us today and being willing to be part of these conversations and educating all of us on the work that they're doing and that they're imagining can be done with this new technology. We are fortunate to have not one, but two corrections leaders here as panelists, the director of the Idaho Department of Corrections, Bree Derrick, and the director of the Utah Department of Corrections, Jared Garcia. We are also grateful to have Dean Worthington, who's the Senior Director of AI Strategy at the Center for Employment Opportunities, to discuss how AI is impacting the work that CEO does to help people coming home from prison find paths to financial stability. And finally, Serena Townsend, the managing partner at Townsend Law and the former deputy commissioner at the New York City Department of Corrections, is going to share her insights on the role that AI can play in driving accountability and improving safety in correctional settings that can lack both of these important characteristics, accountability and safety. Thank you all for being here, for joining this important conversation. I'd also just want to make a quick shout out to Rebecca Atkinson, who's the Director of Partnerships and Programs from the Future Public Safety team. Thank you, Rebecca, for all the work you've done in supporting this webinar series. And finally, a big thank you to Christopher Edley, the Executive Director of the AI and Justice Consortium, for his very thoughtful partnership, all the work he's put into this series, including serving as our fearless moderator across all three of these webinars. And I will now turn it over to Chris to kick off what I'm sure is going to be a very interesting conversation. So thank you all.
Thanks, Erica. I would not say fearless all the time necessarily, but thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, hosts. This series, Demystifying AI in Criminal Justice with John Jay, has been a tremendous start to the consortium. My name is Chris Edley. I'm the executive director. Our purpose is really to bring folks together to have these challenging, sensitive, exciting conversations about how, if, when we should be using AI across the entire criminal justice system. So our first two panels were on policing and the courts, and today we switch to incarceration. These are particularly sensitive subjects. Incarcerated individuals, those navigating reentry, often have the least power to refuse or challenge AI's use in the system. There are also tremendous opportunities to increase safety, reduce burnout, provide opportunities for education and stability for incarcerated people. So there's a lot to cover today, and I think that we should pretty much just jump right in with questions. But before we do, I want to acknowledge the fact that there are two very important voices missing from the conversation today. The first is correctional officers who are tasked with using a lot of this technology. Um, and the second, of course, is incarcerated people. And there's a third, which is formerly incarcerated people. We'll be doing programming in the future that involves all of those different stakeholder groups. So keep an eye out for that coming up in the next couple months. Uh, Housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded. It'll be made available after the event as a recording so you can share it with your friends and colleagues. Please use the question and answer function to submit questions. We'll do about 10 to 15 at the end of audience QA. And I think that that's it. Let's go to our amazing panelists. It really helps, we found, to start with use cases to understand, what we're really talking about, establish what AI in the correctional and reentry settings really looks like, from risk assessment tools, surveillance systems, classification, programs that support reentry planning. So uh, I'd like each of you to introduce yourself in your own words if you feel Erica didn't fully cover everything you want known about yourself or your organization, and then B, answer the question, what is one application of AI that you've seen, are working on, or wish you could see in corrections or reentry? And then what opportunities and or concerns does it raise? So starting out big. Uh, Director Derek, let's start with you.
Great. Thanks for having me. Again, my name is Bree Derrick, and I'm currently the director of the Idaho Department of Correction. And when I think about AI in the correction space, just a bit of level setting, a lot of the technology in corrections is years and years behind. So we're probably not doing the most cutting edge AI applications at this point in time. But I can say one of the things that I'm really interested in is some surveillance tools that we're deploying currently. And those are tools that are actually leveraging information generated by the incarcerated population, but really surveilling things that include mental health, wellness for people who are incarcerated, as well as for the potential of bad things happening, people maybe coordinating to bring drugs into a facility or plan some violence. I think one of the most exciting pieces is its ability, the technology's ability to really pick up on the contextual pieces of conversation or communication to identify people who might frankly be at risk to harming themselves or others. And that's really promising. And I'd say on the question of what concerns does it raise for me, it's always that balance of surveillance in the environment and how much privacy are people entitled to in an incarcerative setting.
Thank you, thank you. Director Garcia, let's go to you next.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me as well. I appreciate the opportunity. Um, just a quick background on me. I spent my first 22 years in public safety in law enforcement for the Utah Department of Public Safety, and then as a police chief. So I really still consider myself to be a rookie in corrections because I've been at it for 2.5 years and I'm still learning so much about this profession and the complexities. But as far as the tools that I think are really critical right now are the tools that help us with our operational efficiency. So probably most importantly for me, and I have to make I was laughing as Bree was talking because I'm like she stole my law enforcement lens and went straight to the information and intelligence piece. But I'm going to actually go the opposite direction and focus on the importance of early assessment on these individuals. I think that's a critical part that we play in corrections early on, even before people are sentenced, in assessing how they even got to this point in their life. And I think one amazing thing about artificial intelligence right now is it removes that human bias from the equation, and it allows us to really get to the root cause of why people offended, what their needs are moving forward, and how we can help them to successfully rehabilitate and reenter society. In Utah, 95% of these folks are going to be our neighbors, and we have to do a much better job. As far as the concerns that I have, it just Bree kind of touched on it, but also I think that there's a balance to strike. We don't want to replace human beings. I think these tools are great to increase our efficiency and our capabilities, but we need to maintain a human lens and eyes on these things and involvement. And I think our staff gets really worried about artificial intelligence as a whole, and it's our job to educate them that this is really a force multiplier, not a replacer.
Hmm. Dane Worthington.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, John Jay, for the invite. in this important forum to talk about these issues. I'm Dane Worthington, Director of AI Strategy at the Center for Employment Opportunities, or most people know us as CEO. I've been with the organization for 10 years, obviously not focused on AI for most of that time. So I come to this not as a technologist, but really as a practitioner. And, we as an organization work with folks recently released from incarceration. We provide immediate employment and place them into full-time jobs. So we really have a laser focus on employment. I think the use case that we've been piloting and soon to be scaling is around utilizing AI's ability to have really realistic voice conversations to supplement the coaching that we offer folks, to allow them to get a lot more practice and feedback, to be able to, adapt their communication styles from what may have worked on the inside to what can work on the outside and in the workplace. I think I'll also just underline what Director Garcia said. We really see this as not a replacement for the human coaching that we do, but there's just not enough human time to really get folks the practice that they ideally would need. So this allows our coaches to free their time up to really focus on the trust building and helping folks bring about change in their lives, and allows the AI voice coaches to do some of the more repetitive practice that folks can do in between our coaching sessions.
Thank you. And Serena.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. My name is Serena Townsend. I'm the owner of a law firm called Townsend Law, PLLC. I do criminal defense and civil litigation. But before that, I was a prosecutor in Brooklyn for 10 years. And following that, I ran internal affairs and staff discipline at Rikers Island for about 5.5 years. So, obviously people are going to assume I'm going to talk about accountability. Bree kind of took some of my ideas on surveillance, which I totally agree with. I agree with everybody who has spoken so far. What I would love to see in the AI space is programming that follows somebody when they are released. So in speaking about this and thinking about this, we've evolved our programming in jails and prisons. Particularly in jail settings, though, like Rikers, where you're not supposed to really be there for a long period of time, there are these efforts to rehabilitate while there. And sometimes those efforts fail because people are just not there long enough. And there's no feedback loop and there's no ability to follow somebody home. And a lot of times people, when they go home, they reoffend because they go back to the environments that have brought them there to begin with. I feel like AI can be used with programming while somebody's incarcerated, track their progress, see where their failures are, see how they could improve in real time. And then perhaps they can utilize that program, download, all of what they've done so far and the progress and the reports and the data onto a thumb drive, perhaps, and they leave Rikers or any other jail setting, go home, and they could continue to progress in that environment, despite the fact that they are now released. Obviously, the concerns I have, especially as a criminal defense attorney, is the surveillance piece. Are there going to be some sort of admissions made by the incarcerated individual during the programming that a prosecutor could use against them potentially in the case or in subsequent cases? So any generation of data worries me a little bit for my clients, but I do think there are ways around that, and it's an important thing to consider for the future.
Excellent. Thank you all. Director Derek, we're going to go to you. So Idaho has become a national model for corrections reform. I don't say that lightly. It's been pretty amazing. And you've emphasized this idea of leading with humanity and behavior change. And it seems I heard you on a panel a couple months ago out in Idaho and sitting down with folks formerly incarcerated who are running programs and are partners of yours, and was quite impressed. So when AI systems are being used to inform decisions about, housing assignments, eligibility for programs, classifications, how do you sort of ensure that those tools are supporting rehabilitation goals?
Yeah, so I'll be clear, first of all, that in Idaho, we haven't used AI too much in this space. We are really just kind of toe in the water related to classification specifically. And one of the ways that I actually think it's helpful is that historically, the way housing classification has worked here and in many states is, people might be assessed once a year or once every couple years according to some established policy, and they could be actively working on themselves. They could be in education classes, in risk reducing programming. They could be doing lots of things that are really productive and show that they behaviorally are improving. And our historic classification systems have not accounted for that. Really, it's like, well, that's great. You've spent the last, 11 months really working on yourself. You haven't had any misconducts. You've been doing all the right things. We'll still see you 1 year from now or 2 years from now, and that's when we'll do a reassessment. So the way that we're leveraging just machine learning at all is really in that space saying, hey, let's make this more dynamic. So as people are completing programs, we can immediately kind of reassess where they fall in terms of housing custody level so that the people who are making good choices get rewarded and incentivized for those good choices sooner rather than just waiting for these kind of standard protocols. So that's one place where we've deployed it already. And I think the shift is that we're seeing people being able to be reduced from higher custody levels to lower custody levels sooner. So that's pretty exciting for us.
Wow. Director Garcia, creating opportunities for folks to rebuild their lives and not just managing incarceration. Um, when you're evaluating AI tools for help in classification or risk assessment, what questions do you asking to make sure that they're aligned with that mission of rehabilitation and opportunity? And I'd love if you touch on the role of documentation
Yeah.
in these.
No, it's a great question. I mean, I first of all look at the vendor and their reputation and what they've accomplished over time. I personally don't want the state of Utah to go into business with somebody that doesn't have faith in their own product, and so I ask that they come and do a pilot with us at zero cost to us, because if they're that confident in their pilot, then they should have the confidence to do that. But I also, again, don't want total replacement of human beings. I don't want to lose that human factor and the element of compassion and care that could potentially get lost with artificial intelligence. And then as far as the documentation piece, I think that's an area nationally in corrections where we need to improve significantly. And I speak from that law enforcement lens right now, but I think corrections overall is really good at documenting the bad and the ugly, but not so great at documenting the great behavior that is occurring behind the walls. And so for us to make the best possible decision, or at least provides the information of the Board of Pardons or the courts to make the best possible decision, we need to document all things. And I think that's where artificial intelligence can really help us to do that, because correctional officers don't have the same amount of free time that law enforcement officers do out in the community. And so we need to create opportunity for them to document in a much more efficient and effective way. And we are starting to see some tools here in Utah that we're getting ready to deploy by leveraging body cameras, leveraging our artificial intelligence to help our officers to document everything. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to help us to create better outcomes in our system.
So positive data as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Serena, leading internal affairs at Rikers, you witnessed a very violent jail firsthand. I would like for you to talk about how AI could be used to mitigate or stop violence in jails and prisons, and what the calculus should be when deciding whether those tools and uses are appropriate.
It's a great question. I definitely witnessed a lot of excessive uses of force, inmate on inmate fighting. I think that there's a lot of use with AI, just to piggyback off of Director Garcia, in data collection and using that data to make changes, staffing changes, etc. So, for example, at Rikers Island, one of the biggest problems that Rikers faced is staffing issues, understaffing, unstaffed posts, not knowing where officers were, having a high head count but having officers working in offices rather than in the jails. And I know that one thing that was very effective with us and liaising with our federal monitor was trying to figure out when and where acts of violence were happening more often than not. So we would be able to narrow down, for example, a certain shift in a certain jail facility, during a certain time period. But I think using AI to expand on something like that, to determine, hey, it turns out that detainees happen to be more violent at OBCC on Saturday on the 3 to 11 tour. It's very, very helpful to allow executives at the top to make determinations on who to staff where, how many posts need to be staffed in different locations. And I think there's a million ways to use AI to help, mitigate violence, but that is one extremely easy way to do it. Collecting, data that cannot be manipulated and filling those spots with officers who can handle and hopefully mitigate the violence that might otherwise happen otherwise.
Thank you. Dane, I want to jump to you. Uh, CEO is using AI strategy to help people who are currently and formerly involved. Can you talk about how you view the opportunities and potential pitfalls, particularly when it comes to surveillance and supervision, and sort of can provide how those, what opportunities there are to provide more support, but what the tension is there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we as an organization, we're a nonprofit that works for the folks that we serve. So that's definitely the lens that we come to this at. So whenever we're not necessarily even like a technology first nonprofit, I don't view it as a silver bullet. It's a tool like many other tools. With some pretty interesting capabilities, but whenever we're thinking of utilizing it, we talk to those that we serve. Like, what are the roadblocks that they're facing? What if we had this capability? We also think of it from a staff side. So how can we run better as an organization? How can we be more responsive to our participants? So another use case that I didn't mention at the top, but we're utilizing some of the AI note-taking software during our case management meetings so that we can really hear what participants are actually saying in an interaction and get that transcription between the two, and then give the staff member feedback on the principles that we train them in, whether it be using person-centered language, motivational interviewing techniques, or, general case management best practices. So it both reduces the staff burnout because nobody likes taking case notes. It also allows the staff member to be really focused on the person, do deep listening, be the best, coach and conversationalist they can be, and not worry about, scribbling out notes feverishly or trying to recall them after the meeting or at the end of the day. So it represents a huge time suck for our staff. And then we really can understand what participants are actually bringing up. So with AI, you can analyze metadata around trends. You could analyze what makes this job developer particularly effective. So I think that there's some great use cases that you can identify, but there's also stuff that, you wouldn't want to. We take our privacy very seriously. We don't want to retain data that we, could potentially be leaked in the worst case scenario. We're an employer, so we also hold a lot of PII, and it's the one thing that keeps, our CIO up at night is thinking about, data breaches. So we want to make sure that any tool that we would invite into our, data environment is, robust and ideally doesn't use any data that it doesn't need to. And even our voice coaches, the example I gave before, we give them robust consent around what we're doing it, why we're doing it. We tell them not to share any PII. We design the system so it doesn't even ask for it. It will give people warnings to not give it to us. Even though we're confident in how we're storing the data, the best practice is like don't have it if you don't need it. Because we serve a vulnerable population that's often the victim of identity theft, unfortunately. So we try to view ourselves as the best steward of their data and really expand the capabilities that we can provide as an organization and the opportunities that we can give to our participants.
Can I ask you to go drill in on one other thing, which is sort of your ability to use, it's the sort of why you chose to use a voice bot. and over the phone. And just that interesting to me interplay between expectations of privacy or surveillance that already exists within the system. Um,
Mhm.
Go ahead, take it from there.
Yeah, well, our voice coaches, we actually we utilized what's really designed for automating customer service calls. We used one of these platforms so that our participants didn't have to have a smartphone with an app and log in with strong Wi-Fi, which is a digital divide that, a huge percentage of our participants face that are recently coming home. So it allowed us to connect our voice coaches to phone numbers so that our participants, all they have to do is just dial the number of the coach that they want to talk to, and they just use their voice. They don't even need to do anything else. So even if they switched phone numbers, switched phones, was broken, you could use a pay phone, you can use a library, you can access it anyway.
Yeah,
So it really it sort of took down one of the traditional digital barriers that keeps this population away from some of the more cutting edge digital tools.
fascinating.
But in terms of their privacy, like we don't use it as surveillance. So everybody has
Well,
consented into this tool and given their ID number, that ID number has consented. And we delete voice recordings because we don't want to hold biometric data. We hold transcriptions for a limited amount of time just for our own learning. But that's how we design the tool because again, we do it for our participants, not for us necessarily.
Fascinating. Director Derek, you've worked extensively on reentry approaches. So I want to take a step back for a moment from AI applications and talk about preparing people who are incarcerated uh, to come into this brave new world where AI is everywhere and everything all the time, seemingly. What are you doing for people, and
Yeah,
how are
I
you thinking
think
about doing things?
Yeah, there are two things I would highlight in the reentry space that are pretty exciting. So the first is that we've worked with a tech vendor to really help develop, and I think Director Garcia has a similar situation in Utah, but really to help people prepare for reentry by completing some self-assessments with a chatbot and really getting basically the foundation of a reentry plan generated that's really tailored to them, to where they hope to go back to, what community supports they may have, what challenges they may have. And that's just in the pilot stages for us right now. But what we're hearing from the facilities that are piloting that, from the client perspective, is that it's generating a more robust and personalized kind of case plan to help guide their reentry, really tailored resources that it's our staff just have not had the capacity to do, leveraging all sorts of data around where are their local food banks, where are their shelters, or whatever needs somebody may have. It's really able to pull in a lot more information than our case managers have historically been able to do. So feeling like from the resident perspective, it's a much improved and more robust case plan to help guide their reentry. So we're excited about that. And then I think another place that we've seen just the AI explosion, and I argue this is probably some of the most cutting edge work that's happening behind the walls. We have a local say vendor, but more of a partner. It's a local business who wanted to work with our resident population at, fair wage paying jobs, but for people who are currently incarcerated. So they actually built a small facility within our prison walls. We have women who work there, about 35 women who are medium custody women who go and they work basically in a sales center. And they historically had done, cold calls and all those sales techniques you would imagine, just sending random emails to people. They are leveraging AI technology in that space in a way that I was out visiting recently, and they said, they used to be able to maybe send 20 emails a day or respond to 20 emails, and they have the 10x'd that. So for them, the ability in a sales space has been huge. But what that means for the women who are incarcerated is they actually are paid not only a fair wage, but they are incentivized just like any salesperson in the free world would be. So the more sales they generate, the more bonuses they're actually financial bonuses they're able to receive. So that's a pretty cool technology that's actually happening in partnership with this local firm, and it's happening behind the prison walls.
Uh, Director Garcia, can I ask the same of you? Um, in reentry work, how is AI being used, and how are you preparing people? Like, to the end of Director Derek's answer, to use AI in the future, as they'll
Yeah,
probably be forced to do for employment.
yeah, absolutely. I think we do have similar pilots going on. Mine's actually not a pilot now. We're contracted with a vendor who leverages AI to conduct these assessments that I mentioned earlier. But the key to that is the actual case management and tracking piece of that. And so we're able to identify their needs. We all know what they are. It's going to be housing, employment, substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, the ability to have positive relationships, the ability to maintain employment and housing. All those things are going to be tracked through this case management system. But the amazing thing about that is the ability to continue to assess because of those man hours that get taken up by your staff that you don't always have. So we can do these assessments frequently as we see progress. And then on the very tail end of this, there's an app that actually provides the case management tool to the person that's reentering and tells them where they're at, what time their appointment is, reminds them of things that they need to get done. And I think the other piece to this is we have to be able to self-evaluate. And so these tools are going to tell us where we're falling short as an agency, as leaders, and that provides us a better opportunity to improve our practices and our processes. So that's, I think, what I'm really most excited about is the ability to really truly tell the story. A lot of agencies and leaders will say, "Oh, we're killing it. We're fantastic," but they don't have the data to support that. I actually want to know where we're falling short so we can improve moving forward. So I think these tools are going to help us to get better as a whole through corrections nationwide.
Right, right. Um, I want to move on to transparency and accountability sort of questions. Um, Serena, uh, you led investigations and accountability at Rikers. When AI systems start informing decisions about people in custody, um, who's responsible when something goes wrong with the systems, and sort of how would you go about investigating that?
A great question. I mean, we even investigated people who were leaking images out of Rikers Island by accessing the surveillance video cameras inappropriately. And so it is sometimes difficult to conduct those investigations. We would find people logging in under other people's account information in order to access that information and then spread it to the media. And so basically, what I would suggest is a robust investigative experience, but also training for the officers or whoever is going to be using AI. I think a very big complaint that we would get when I was investigating and disciplining staff is, we have this new technology or we have this new rule or we have this new thing that we have to do, but we weren't trained properly on it. And yet here we are being held accountable for not doing it correctly. Whether that was as simple as, entering information into a computer, which some people were not as literate as others to do those things. So, I think that correction officers and other staff members who are going to be essentially forced to adapt, forced to use AI, and forced to kind of do these things that they're not used to doing, if we're going to hold them accountable, we have to make sure that we've given them the tools and the training to learn how to do it in the first place. Because, at the end of the day, the department is responsible for making sure that their staff is doing the right thing. And when their staff doesn't do the right thing, who does it fall on? The staff member or the people who didn't train them properly?
Right. Um, Director Garcia, I want to go back to you and hear how you think about accountability structures when AI is in the mix.
Yeah, I want to bring Serena out to Utah because everything she says are things that I've been thinking about a lot lately. But I'm going to again put my law enforcement hat on here, and one of my philosophies for our department in Utah is move the middle. We're going to move the middle. We spend a lot of time on high utilizers and people that drain our systems, whether it's in the community or in our facilities. But the bottom line is we have to keep people safe. They have to know that they're safe. They have to feel that like they're safe, and that's where the accountability piece comes in. Is by leveraging information and intelligence to remove the bullies and the predators from those people who truly want to change their lives. We owe it to those people who want to change their lives to create spaces for them to do so. And to Serena's point, that includes staff. So when I think about information and intelligence, I'm not only talking about the people that are under our care, I'm talking about staff that may be compromised, that may be doing the wrong things. And within this profession, we don't have any room for that, just like we don't in law enforcement. We need to get rid of those bad actors. They shouldn't be doing this type of work. And the accountability piece applies to them as well. And I think that's where a lot of these tools can help us to actually weed out the bad actors. To Serena's point, we have to be thorough, complete, and professional when we investigate all of these cases. And I think this technology, again, is another tool that can help us to be more efficient and effective in identifying the people that are truly trying to do the right things versus those who aren't.
Interesting. So body worn camera footage and audio reviews, things like that.
Absolutely. I think as those things enhance, and Bree touched on this, I think correctional agencies throughout this country have been underfunded and have underinvested in the use of technology. I think nationally, at least we're starting to see it with the state agencies. I think we're starting to catch up and get the hint that we better do that or we're going to get left behind.
Gotcha. Uh, Dane, you touched on the sort of stewardship consent issues with folks who are out of prison um, and who have returned to the free world. But how do you think about it when folks are still incarcerated?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated, obviously. So we're we've deployed our voice coaches on the outside using people's private phones, calling into our voice coaches. We're exploring what it would mean to bring the same capabilities to folks that are currently incarcerated, also using the phone systems to be able to access the coaches, because that's one way to have this dynamic back and forth, skill building conversation that really feels very realistic. Because the current technology in correctional facilities is folks have tablets that have various apps that have, educational content, entertainment content. It's talking to a local server, but that server is firewalled from the internet. So there's no way to have the same capability um, without using the phone system. However, how do you ensure that you're providing the same level of consent and people are opting in and understanding, uh, um, what they're getting into? And we've talked about doing this in various ways. Usually that involves pairing this capability with existing rehabilitative programming. So it's supplementing the coaches, the workshops, the classes that are happening in a correctional facility where whoever's running the workshop probably doesn't have time to do role plays and give feedback to 30 different people. You could supplement that programming. There's also things like facility-wide messaging that you can send out through the tablet system that can let folks know this is this thing that's optional. You know, here's the purpose of it. Here's, the parameters. By consenting, do you agree to do this? And then if they call a number, you get another verbal consent at the top of it. Is an example of how we're trying to think through some of these. What is it's new territory as far as I know, nobody has tried this thus far. So yes, more complicated, but I think there's ways to ensure proper consent and mitigate, downside risks. Also, the content that we're presenting to folks is very much focused on employment because that's our wheelhouse. I think there's other things that you could think about that are a little bit more thorny that we've kind of shied away from. For example, one use case is helping folks prepare for parole or commutation hearings. Nonprofits that we know in the space that do this do it through lawyers. Sometimes they do it through privileged lines. So they're, coaching much like you would coach somebody through a job interview, um, except you know, they've got caseloads in the hundreds. There's just not enough of their time to be able to help folks. One way would be to do this. However, we're doing these through recorded lines. So kind of what Serena was alluding to earlier, if somebody through the process of coaching them on how to answer typical questions they may face, what if their starting point answers and were used against them later, for example, because it's a recorded line? That's enough for us to say, that's complicated. We're definitely not going to start there. It's still something that is an identified, it is a use case, but it involves a level of risk that we're currently not comfortable with if we're not able to mitigate it but is something that we would love to be able to offer, given, maybe a future state.
Gotcha. Thank you. We have about 4 minutes before we want to jump over to QA, question and answer. So I would ask the audience to put as many questions as they have in there. Uh, and I think that let's just go to a sort of lightning round because 4 minutes isn't very long. Um, if you, all of you panelists, could leave our audience with one key takeaway or call to action about AI and incarceration, what would it be? How about Director Derek?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think for me and for other folks in similar roles, I think the call to action is to be really thoughtful about which technologies we deploy. And I would say, as it relates to what's going on in the Idaho context, we're seeing an interest from our lawmakers around really putting some framework in place about what sorts of technology can be used. I don't know if that will advance this legislative session, but I think it's a good reminder for all of us. Often in the seat like I'm in right now, vendors are marketing to us directly all the time. Like, this is the latest and greatest, and you need to have this. And we need to have a filter and a framework, where we can objectively sort of review these things, what the risks, the benefits, for our staff, for the populations we serve, and to really make sure we're making thoughtful decisions, not just sort of buying the newest, shiniest thing that promises to save time.
Right. And Director Garcia touched on this earlier, but the sort of evaluation over time of quality is a big aspect of this, and or sandboxing prior to actual deployment. These hours are too short for these conversations, so we'll have to do more. There's certainly things to talk about in procurement and build or buy, as Dane's building. Um, Director Garcia, same to you. One key takeaway, call to action.
Yeah, I think my call to action is for us to be more forward thinking. I think we need to bridge the gap between corrections and law enforcement. Corrections folks and agencies have a lot to offer to the public safety and criminal justice system. So, really, my call to action is to partner with your chiefs and sheriffs and leverage these technologies to get upstream, conduct these assessments the first time someone's arrested when they're in the police car or in a county jail, and let's find ways to prevent people from coming to prison altogether. Additionally, find ways to connect the secondary victims, meaning family members. And I use domestic violence as an example, where if a young man sees his father strike his mother, now that young man thinks that that's normal for the rest of their life. These are opportunities for us to intercept by leveraging assessment and technology and case management, and prevent people from coming to prison and becoming that next generation of offenders, and which in turn will make our community safer overall.
Mm. Serena,
Yeah,
one key takeaway or call. Go
sure.
ahead.
All great answers. I agree with everything that's been said so far. So I'll go with a different topic. I think just in general, the key takeaway, I think, is to be open-minded. And also, because I'm a lawyer, I'll say it, beware of litigation, right? Like, we know that there's can be a ton of benefits, including, by the way, like money-saving benefits. I'm hearing, these directors talk about how they don't have, enough staff to do all of these things. And here you have potential technology that can be used, not in lieu of staff, but to support it. And so you can save a lot of money by not hiring a ton of extra people to do this work. So definitely be open-minded, but also realize that people like me, right, defense attorneys, are going to push back a ton because of the privacy concerns, attorney-client privilege, stuff like that. So don't let that scare you, I think, because we are moving into this space. This is the future, but just go about it probably with legal counsel.
There's the explainability questions about the technology, right? Yeah, lots to do. Dane, last one, takeaway, call to action.
Yeah, I know we're trying to get to Q&A, so I'll just say bring in your users early and often,
Mm,
because you'll learn way more by doing that.
mm. Product research, product design. I love that. Thank you all. Let's go to the audience questions. And I better open up my chat to find out what they are. And also who is feeding them to me. Okay. Director Garcia, the idea that AI can remove human bias from a system is a hotly debated and contested claim. Um, how do you ensure that AI systems used by your team are indeed free from those human biases that are built into the training data?
No, that is a great question, and I do hear the debates, and I don't disagree with them. Um, what I do see though is biases do appear frequently in assessments done by staff, and I'll use like our adult probation and parole staff that are conducting community supervision. If they have an opportunity to rate someone higher, or excuse me, a lower level of risk versus high, maybe it's a marginal assessment. Human behavior is likely going to have them assess someone lower because that requires less work from them, and that's not the right thing to do. But we see that all the time. We do, again, to eliminate the biases. We keep human beings involved. So the tool that we're using kind of measures whether or not the reliability of each answer based on the artificial intelligence. But then we have human beings that actually look at the assessments before we actually validate that and use that as our standard. So I think that's important. I think another thing to talk about, and I'll be brief, is just when we tested these tools out in front of our inmates, we had concerns on how they would respond to the tool, and over 90% of them actually preferred speaking to the artificial intelligence bot because they felt like they were not being judged. They felt like they could be more truthful in their answers and more open and
Mhm.
honest. So, yeah, it is a technology is an area that we constantly have to evaluate and try to strike a balance. I think keeping human beings involved still helps to guard against the bias, but I think it's also important to realize that they exist both in technology and with human beings, and so it's going to be a work in progress. And I don't think it'll ever be perfect, but it certainly does help with efficiency.
Right. Any Anybody else is free to jump in on any of the QA question and answers also if they'd like. So just, indicate somehow. Um, uh, this one I'm not sure exactly who to go to, but possibly Serena. Um, are surveillance tools used in prisons subject to independent external auditing or oversight to ensure that they function properly, comply with rights, and include safeguards for the lawful processing and secure storage of data?
That is such a good question. Especially thank you for coming to me since I, investigated wrongdoing or, overstepping. I completely agree with the concerns that are raised in this question that are inherent in the question itself. And I think there should be. I don't know if there are right now in prisons that are currently using AI or about to use AI, and I'd love to hear from the directors on that. But for me, I would love for not only the internal affairs division within your jails and prisons to have the capability and capacity to investigate and audit these processes, but yeah, an independent oversight would not be a bad idea. A lot of people obviously complain that when you have an internal affairs division, sometimes it's biased or whatever else because it works within the department, and having an external oversight is sometimes looked upon as kind of this disinterested third party that might do a better job. But generally speaking, I think it's a great idea. And I especially think it's a good idea because I think that if you hire the right people to do that external audit, you might be, involving yourself with people who know technology a bit better. This is self-deprecating, by the way, who know technology better to do those audits than perhaps just your regular internal affairs investigator who may not, really have that background. So I think it's a good idea, especially in the beginning.
Right, that interdisciplinary capacity. Director Derek,
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I was just going to jump in and say, I mean, I think the state of the field, frankly, for directors around the country it's pretty new to us. And I don't think most places have any sort of independent oversight happening yet. I sit on a national panel around AI, and we're trying to work on specific guidance for the field because we frankly feel like the technology is and the vendors are kind of coming in faster than our state government can really keep up. And so we are trying to help directors or similarly situated folks who are in these roles to know what are the questions to ask. And I think, we've been fortunate in Idaho that, like, in particular, one of the technology vendors we work with who is beginning this deployment in a couple of spaces, their software is open source. And so we're able to actually review their source code and make sure we can validate that data. But that's not true of everybody in the space who's, selling a product.
Interesting. And I'm thinking that even if they are open source, you just don't have that capacity at the at the state level. And this is true across uh, all the different sorts of agencies involved in the criminal justice system, from large states, correctional systems, all the way down to, municipal courts. Right?
Totally. Like we lack the technological expertise. And so when I made reference to legislation that may pass, and we've seen similar legislation come out of Texas, for example, where they're really mandating that there's kind of an responsibility by any tech provider or vendor to demonstrate some, kind of reliability of the tool, to share not the proprietary pieces of it, but really to allow for some level of validation and oversight, just to make sure that we have confidence in the AI that's being deployed.
Trade secrets is a challenge um, challenge, and it's sort of like Dobert versus trade secrets sometimes. Here's another one, and it is related to the first question, I think, about bias, but this one is about mistakes. AI systems, just like humans, make mistakes. Uh, what type of human oversight structures are you trying to deploy, or even AI oversight structures to try and catch mistakes made by AI, uh, so that things don't slip through the cracks, get repeated upon, snowball, etc. Um, Thinking about classification systems in particular. Maybe this is to the directors again.
I I can go. I mean, I think I touched on it a little bit, but look, in law enforcement, all information is good. Not all information is intelligence, and that's what we're talking about here is verification of the information, that it's usable, that it's not, and it all has different levels of usability, right? So that's why it's so critical for human beings to remain involved in the process, to verify assessments, to verify information. Uh, I'm kind of going to go back to the question before and related to data, but as we build out our records management system in Utah, we're replacing our old system. We want to ensure that we control all the data internally. And that's a huge part of this. We have a centralized technology services department that oversees all state agencies in Utah, and their primary, one of their probably their biggest primary responsibility is cybersecurity and protecting people's information and data, and making sure that we're following retention standards and those things. But I think that the key to this is we can't simply just rely on the information that's provided from artificial intelligence. Again, human beings need to verify it. It needs to be vetted. And just like any criminal investigation, some information is more reliable than others. And that's for us to kind of decipher depending on the situation and scenario that we're involved in.
I see, I see. Just one thing I'm hearing across this is just it's about augmentation and almost collaboration with AI systems much more than it's about replacement. Um, we did have a question that we skipped, which was about uh, it, what role corrections officers should have in deciding on what tools to deploy. So I'd sort of put that out there, and the answer might just be a lot, or but sort of talk about why, and that sort of goes, Dane, also to your bring your users in often takeaway. So, uh, Serena, do you want to take that, or Director Derek? Either one, anybody, or sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I think that correction officers should have a large role in determining when and how AI should be used. They're the ones who are going to be using it a lot. I mean, everybody could use AI in this potential system, executives, etc. But one would hope that we would rely on correction officers to utilize it as well. I mean, even just, right now, Rikers has logbooks and it's paper. It hasn't even become electronic yet. They're working on that. But going to AI, I mean, these are things that correction officers have to do. I mean, you hear law enforcement, I'm sure Director Garcia could talk about this, police officers, sheriffs complaining all the time, oh, my job has turned into paperwork. It's turned into paperwork. And I want to be doing law enforcement, not writing papers. So I think, correction officers should definitely have a say and a role in how this proceeds, because these are the staff members that I think we're going to be relying on a lot to be the users. We have to make sure that they are accurate and that they're comfortable.
Mm.
Can I add to that, Chris?
Yes, you can. I think
Yeah,
this is
I mean,
going to be our last question. Go ahead.
really great point, Serena. And that's why I mentioned earlier the importance of pilots and companies being willing to pilot their product for our agencies. I have a recent example where we have two competing companies assisting our adult probation and parole by leveraging some AI technology. And as they talk about their product externally, they're both telling other states and other organizations how they're killing it for us. But luckily for me, I have a brilliant director of technology innovation who took it upon herself to conduct internal surveys of our staff to find out which product they preferred, which product made their job more efficient and effective. And it was overwhelming that one company was overperforming versus the other. And we would have never had that information had we not actually put the tools in the hands of the people that are using it and then actually done our own surveys. Because really, at the end of the day, me, Bree, Serena, Dane, none of us, well, maybe, I don't know, Dane, I guess I don't know your situation personally, but I can tell you, I'm not the one using the tools every day. It's my staff. And so we need to obtain their feedback to make the right decisions.
Right. I think we have about 90 seconds left before the hour, so we should pretty much leave it here. This has been a great conversation. I wish we could do it all day, or maybe for a couple days, so maybe we should try to do that at some point. I'll email you. Thank you all very much for contributing your wisdom, your expertise. Also, one thing that I've really appreciated throughout this series that we've been doing with John Jay has been the willingness to admit that you still have questions yourself, and that we are early in this, journey of figuring out how and when and if to use AI in various places in the criminal justice system. So this level of humility I really appreciate from all of you, and your willingness to share and inspire, hopefully inspire others to continue to question, imagine, be creative. And I'll leave it there. John Jay, College of Criminal Justice Future of Public Safety Initiative, my sincere gratitude. And check a couple before you log out, a couple excellent things in the chat to pick up on. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow all these folks on LinkedIn, and hopefully we'll catch you all in the near future. Thank you.